Hello everyone and welcome to another video. So at this point, I've basically given up on my immune system. Literally the day after I filmed last week's video, I got sick again. And before that, I was sick for like 3 weeks and I couldn't film. Basically, I'm about ready to throw my tonsils in the bin because they've just not been working or doing the job that tonsils are supposed to. And they're just always swollen and sore, and I get sick so easily in this country. I don't know why, but I am so done with it. I am so over not being able to film videos because I'm sick, so I'm just gonna film anyway. I'm really sorry my voice is gonna sound gravelly and annoying, and I'm gonna be a sniffly mess for this entire video, but I have my tea, I have some cough lollies somewhere, and I'm gonna do my best. So today I wanted to speak about homesickness. Tyler and I have now been living in Japan for 11 months, over 11 months, and during that time I've experienced two kind of bad periods of homesickness. The first one was in December and January, and the second one was around February. I'm more than over it now. I haven't had homesickness in a really long time. I think this is a really important thing to talk about because so many people move overseas, so many people move to different countries or go live in different cultures, and that can be a really big thing for some people. And lots of those people experience homesickness to a degree, myself included, and that homesickness can be really difficult to deal with and it can manifest in different ways. My homesickness completely went away once I realized when we would be leaving Japan, which will be later this year. I still miss things from home, quite a few things, but I don't miss them as intensely and I don't experience homesickness as such. Now I just preemptively miss things from here that I'm not going to have when I go back to Australia later on. Now stupidly, I didn't even think I would get homesick living here. The plan was always to move to Japan for 1 year or a year and a bit and then go back to Australia. And you know, Adelaide wasn't going anywhere. Not to mention, as a kid, I moved around a lot. Now, I never really lived in the same place for very long, so I don't have like a childhood home. When I speak about my hometown, at any given point, I'm speaking about 6 different places. So I figured because I don't have one house or one specific place to miss, that I wouldn't get homesick. I was very wrong. Just because I don't miss a specific house or a specific town doesn't mean I don't miss home. Also, it's kind of impossible for you to understand and even grasp what your own culture is until you've lived in someone else's culture for an extended period of time. I didn't realize it would be possible for me to miss Australian culture while living in Japan. Now, I'm going to preface this as always by saying I love living in Japan. I absolutely adore Tokyo. It's still my favorite place on the planet. I love living here. When I have to leave Japan, I'm going to be absolutely heartbroken. When I have to say goodbye to my students after teaching them for their last lesson, I am going to cry so much. But in saying that, no matter how much I love it here, no matter how much I love living here, how much I've studied the culture, how much I've studied the language, all of the stuff that I've done to prepare myself for living in a different culture, I still miss things from my home country. For example, being able to easily communicate in my own language, not having to be whisper quiet in my own home. I'm pretty sure all of my neighbors know that I have a YouTube channel. The walls are so thin here and you have to try and be so quiet. And that's just not something you have to deal with back in Australia. Having access to really cheap, fresh, good quality fruits and vegetables. Driving. I miss driving, which hurts the environmentalist inside of me. But like, I grew up in country towns where there was literally no public transport. So driving was always like a really big freedom thing for me growing up. I haven't driven a car in 11 months and that's something that I miss a bit. Or even being able to just go outside and be invisible. Like not being stared at for being the only gaijin on the train or the only gaijin walking along the street, being able to just exist normally as a normal member of a culture without having to feel constantly so different because you're in such a tiny minority living here as a foreigner. And there are so many more things that I miss from home, or so many more things that I find like a tiny bit frustrating about living here. But all of these things sort of compounded in that 1 week I had really intense homesickness. I remember Carrie made a video ages ago talking about this. If you're not following Carrie, she's a YouTuber who lives in South Korea. She makes absolutely wonderful vlogs and I love her so much. If you like my content, you'll really love her. I'll link her down in the description below. But yeah, I remember she made a video ages and ages ago where she was speaking about one of her teachers, and her teacher was talking about culture shock. And they said when you move to a different country and you experience culture shock, there will come a time when everything about that culture frustrates the crap out of you. Like, there will be a small period where everything makes you feel ticked off, and it'll end, you'll get past it, and then everything will go back to normal. But that period will happen. And when I watched this video, I was living here, but that hadn't happened yet. And I was like, that's not gonna happen to me. I've studied Japanese language and Japanese culture. You know, I've traveled here so many times. I've lived here for like 2 months or whatever it was. I'm not gonna get like angry culture shock. It happened. There was 1 week, just 1 week, where I had really, really bad homesickness / really, really bad culture shock. And like, stuff I normally really like about Japan, I found so frustrating. Like, one example would be, we were at the grocery store, and when you're at the grocery store in Japan, the people pack your bags, your shopping bags, really, really slowly. And normally I quite like this because it reminds me to be mindful and peaceful and to not be impatient. And they do it so nicely, they pack your bags so carefully, it's a really lovely thing. But this 1 week, I just got so frustrated by how slowly they were doing it. And obviously I didn't say anything or I didn't react because I knew, like, even as frustrated as I was that week, that it was my fault, it was no one else's fault, so I was fine. But it was just little stuff like that really, really grated on me. And that like same sort of time period, I was sick because I was getting sick all the time. I think my shifts had just been cut because there was a holiday coming up. For those of you who don't know, I'm a school teacher living in Japan, and many school teaching jobs are kind of insecure. I don't know if that's the word I'm looking for. Like, you're not guaranteed work. If your kids all quit the class, then you just lose that shift and you like don't have an income anymore. So like, heaps of my shifts were getting cut because of holidays and kids dropping out and all that stuff. So I was just like really, really stressed out and frustrated. And all of that sort of just got to me that 1 week. All of the frustrating things, and I just felt so ticked off with everything, and it was so strange because I'm not normally like that. And it lasted for an entire week, and then it was gone. Everything went back to normal, and I just felt totally fine again. Like, I never found people packing my bags to be frustrating. I don't care if people stare at me. I'm completely over it. I don't notice it 99% of the time now. And everything went back to normal and it was fine. I think this is just something that happens to everyone who lives in a vastly different culture to their own culture. It's just something normal that occurs when you move to a different country. And while I had more homesickness after that, I never had intense culture shock. But that week was really, really difficult for me because I just found everything so frustrating, like illogically frustrating. And that's just a function of having culture shock and living in a different place. I'm really, really glad that I watched Carrie's video so that I knew that it wasn't like my fault. It was just like a thing that happens when you move to a different place. But it was just so intense and so frustrating. And then it just disappeared. I didn't do anything. My attitude didn't like change or anything. It just went away and I accepted everything and I was fine again. And while I've had more homesickness since living here, I've had it in tiny bouts. I've missed certain people and I've missed certain things. I've particularly missed certain foods from home. I haven't had intense culture shock again. Once I had that 1 week, I got over it and then everything was so much easier. And now everything is beautiful again. Like, the last 2 days have been really, really rainy, but it's been like really nice weather apart from that. It's been warm but not humid. The cicadas are chirping again. There's hydrangeas everywhere. And I just love everything about living here. I went into a shop yesterday or the day before and I was buying something, and this like very, very small older lady who was probably like 90 years old or something, she served me, and it was sort of like a family run shop, so I think her daughter or her niece or something was standing behind her. And when I put the money into her hand, she sort of like clasped my hand and held onto it, and in Japanese she was like, "Oh, your hands are so cold," and she stood there like trying to warm my hands with her hands. And it's just this like adorable tiny older Japanese lady who can't speak English, and she's just trying to be super kind, and she's trying to like make my hands warmer because she thought they were really cold. And that was just such a really, really adorable moment. That was just so nice and so lovely. And like that stuff doesn't happen back in Australia, and it's so special to be here. And it's just funny how much it depends on your frame of mind and how you're doing psychologically at that moment, because that's entirely what homesickness is based off of. For me, homesickness hasn't been about missing home, really. There's nothing I really intensely miss. My really intense, really bad homesickness or really intense culture shock has arisen from having to deal with the difficulties of living in a foreign country where you're not fluent in the language. Things get frustrating after a while. Not being able to communicate gets frustrating after a while, and I am so grateful for having the opportunity to become more patient. I'm so grateful to have increased my communication skills and increased my Japanese ability and all of this stuff. And I think we need to be forgiving about that, because it's difficult living in a different country, and you can move to Japan and pretend that everything is sunshine and rainbows and happiness and everything's magical. And it is pretty wonderful most of the time, but there are things that are difficult about living here, and having culture shock, having homesickness is a very legitimate thing to feel when you move to a different country. And just remember that if you have culture shock, if you have homesickness, that's a completely valid experience. It doesn't mean you're being silly or anything, it's just a completely normal part of moving to a different culture. And just keep in mind that it will pass, it will get better, and everything will go back to being good again. If you're like me, it'll be 3 weeks later and you'll be like, why was I upset? Why was I ticked off? I have no idea. It doesn't make any logical sense. It's just something that happened, and we'll just try to forget about it. And now my focus is just trying to appreciate every single part about living here, because when I eventually do go back to Adelaide, I am going to miss so many things from this city, and I'm going to miss it so much. I know I'm just a foreigner living in Tokyo temporarily, I'm not fluent in Japanese, but this is now also a home to me. I've lived here for 11 months. In total, I've spent over a year of my life in Japan. This city means so much to me. This tiny, cramped apartment means so much to me, and I'm going to miss these things, and I'm going to be homesick for these things when I go back to my home country. Basically, just don't ever move overseas, because it really just rips your heart out. You just get so attached to particular things, and when you have to move home or you have to move somewhere else, you just miss the things from the place you were before. Once you move overseas, you're absolutely screwed, because there's always going to be a part of yourself sitting in a different country that you'll be missing. Anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed this super rambly video speaking about homesickness and culture shock and some of my experiences with those two things. I know so many of you live overseas and so many of you want to move to Japan at some point. So how do you deal with homesickness? What is your coping mechanism? Do you talk to your family? Do you try and import things from home? What do you do? And yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed the video and have a lovely day. Bye bye.